Well, this is one of the more difficult concepts throughout this whole process to describe to you. And in fact, one of the very few places where you're going to have to really use your creative eye to kind of bring this all into focus. We need to shape this, and I've already begun to do that now that it's good and dry. But it's not quite as simple as it is for the stem piece. You know, the stem is all lined up using squares. We can't do that here. So you got to use your eyeball and remember what the objective is. Now the objective is to have a straight line going from the center line of the transom all the way up to the nail that we used in the stem to pull the line to begin with. Well, hopefully, you know, you really took your time when you put all your frames, your forms going back and forth, so that this should be fairly easy. But, you know, if it's perfect, boy, you really hit a home run, because, you know, during this whole process, a 16th here, an 8th there, a 16th, a 32nd, all adds up and it does crazy things. So when you're lining this thing up, you might have been a 32nd of an inch off on this form, say, but that's pretty difficult to see. Well, here's where you're going to have to pay the price for all that. Now, it's an easy way to pay that price. Instead of having a center line like we did on the stem, we drew a center line and we came out 1/8 of an inch on either side, which gave us a perfect 1/4 inch going down so that we could bring our stem strips into the strips into the stem. And then as we sanded those down, it gave us that perfect edge. This is going to be a little bit trickier because this is probably going to wave back and forth on you. I mean, we're going, well, a little over 4 feet here. It's going to wave back and forth maybe a 16th of an inch one way, and then if the form's off a 16th, well, there's an 1/8 of an inch, and that's quite a bit. So how do we take care of that? It's actually pretty simple. You still got your line on your transom here that goes straight up and down the back. So if you take a yardstick or a straight edge and go straight up that and look down from the other end, basically what you're doing is you want to draw a line straight down this from this center point all the way up to the other boat. And that line is going to be wherever it happens to fall on this. You know, you can't fake it. You can't go back and forth with it because that's just going to be out of fair when you go to put your strips up. Okay, so the end game is still the same as it was on the stem forms. What we're trying to do is make sure that as we come around with our strips here, that they lay down flat. And the only way to do that, especially when you get between the forms, is to make sure that you have this in place. All right, so I've got a little visual aid here to show you what I've done so far. And if you come up close and take a look here, you'll see that I took this pencil and I put a pencil marker. I basically colored in. After I drew my center line, I colored in so that when I beveled this using, I used a sander and I used the rasp, so that when I bevel this, I basically want to stop so that I'm pretty much an 1/8 of an inch on either side of that center. Okay, so the center line is the center line is the center line. Don't worry about the board itself. Worry about that center line, and I want to be an 1/8 of an inch on either side. Now you're going to notice down here on this transom, where it meets the transom, that it doesn't look like it's a full 1/2 inch thick anymore, and it's not. And that's because as I came up, I was a little bit off-centered here, and that didn't give me enough to have that 1/4 inch there. It's easy enough to fix because remember, it's coming in at an angle. And as it comes in at that angle, if I get a little bit too thin on the top, if I just sand the top down a little bit, that'll give me my 1/4 inch. All right, so I had to come down just probably a little over a 16th of an inch here, maybe closer to an 1/8. If you got to come down much more than that, something probably went wrong, and you might want to take this apart and try again. All right, but it didn't. It worked for me. All right, so now what I'm going to do, I still got my center line going up the rest of this thing, and I'm going to continue to bevel a little bit all the way up to the end until I have what, you know, looks to be pretty close. During the rest of the stripping process as we're coming up, and again, I'll come up to about here and then we'll stop and we'll talk a little bit more, but you're going to want to keep your rasp handy to take care of those final touches as you get closer and closer to the end. All right, so from here, I'm just going to take the sander and the rasp and finish that off, and then we're going to start stripping again.